The funny thing is, I wasn't even supposed to be there. The reunion wasn't mine. It was hers. Class of 2004. Some upscale hotel in the city, valet, champagne bar, monogram name tags. The kind of place where you pretend your life turned out exactly how you planned. Where everyone suddenly remembers how popular you were and how your bad decisions were really just character arcs. She was weirdly excited about it. Not just regular excited. Like, obsessive excited. She started talking about it 6 months out. "Babe, it's gonna be amazing," she said, spinning her laptop around one night to show me the invitation. "Everyone's coming." Like, everyone. I sipped my drink. "Didn't you hate high school?" "I didn't hate it," she said, eyes darting. "You called it a social petri dish run by narcissists." She laughed. "Yeah, but that's everyone's high school. Come on, it'll be fun." I shrugged. "I didn't go to my own reunion. Why would I go to yours?" "Because you're my husband," she said, grabbing my hand. "And I want you there." "All right then." It was flattering in a way. She wanted to show me off. I figured maybe she was proud of where she'd ended up. Stable marriage, good job, still looked great in a black dress. Nothing wrong with that. But then the email started. She volunteered to help plan the event, which turned into phone calls, late-night group chats, endless document revisions. I'd walk into the room, and she'd be typing furiously on her laptop, headphones in, mouthing something silently. Once, I asked what she was working on. "Just the schedule," she said. "Trying to figure out who's giving speeches, who's doing music, that kind of thing." "Speeches?" I asked. "This a TED Talk now?" She laughed. "You'd be surprised. A bunch of people are nervous about what to say." I told them I'd help if anyone needed ideas. I didn't think much of it at the time. She's a high school English teacher. Helping people find the right words is kind of her thing. And then 2 weeks before the event, she started working on something else. Not for the schedule. For herself. I caught her practicing in the mirror one night when she thought I was asleep, standing barefoot in the hallway with a half-full wine glass, whispering lines like, "Some people are more than memories," and "You know when it's real because it stays with you." I asked her what it was the next morning. "Oh, just a warm-up thing," she said, brushing her hair. "Public speaking trick. You say random stuff in the mirror to get comfortable with eye contact." That didn't sound like a real thing. But whatever. The week of the reunion, she started getting jumpy. Over-prepping. Worrying about her outfit like it was prom all over again. "Does this look like I'm trying too hard?" she asked, holding up a silver wrap dress. "You look great," I said. "Too great. Like I'm compensating." I blinked. "Compensating for what?" She paused. "Forget it." The night of the reunion arrived, and I drove us to the hotel. She spent most of the ride checking her teeth in the mirror and adjusting her necklace. "You're fidgety," I said. "I just haven't seen some of these people in 20 years. That's the point of a reunion." "I know," she snapped. "Sorry. I just wanted to go right." We got there. Valet took the car. We walked into a gilded lobby where the air smelled like wealth and forced smiles. I checked in under her name. Got a sticker that said spouse in thick Sharpie. She disappeared almost instantly. "Just mingle," she said. "I've got to check something with the coordinator." She air-kissed my cheek and vanished. I wondered. Grabbed a drink. Talked to a few bored spouses who'd also been dragged into someone else's nostalgia spiral. One guy worked in insurance. One woman owned a vegan candle shop. Everyone was polite. No one cared why anyone was really there. An hour in, I still hadn't seen her. She was across the ballroom, talking to a group I didn't recognize. Lots of loud laughing. Someone touched her arm. She smiled in that way you save for people who make you feel 17 again. Not old. Not tired. Just alive in a memory. A few minutes later, the lights dimmed. Someone clinked a glass. The MC, some guy named Vince who had definitely peaked at quarterback, took the mic and welcomed everyone back. There was polite applause. An awkward slideshow. A brief in memoriam segment that ended with an off-key rendition of Time After Time. Then the speeches started. A woman talked about becoming a nurse. A guy told a funny story about marching band pranks. Then Vince stepped back up. "All right, folks. We've got one more person who wanted to say a few words about lasting love and what it means to grow older with perspective. Someone who reminds us that sometimes the past isn't behind us. It's beside us." He winked. "Give it up for Andrea Miller." I blinked. My wife stood, brushed her dress, and walked to the stage. She never told me she was speaking. She stepped up to the mic, holding a glass of wine, and took a breath like she'd practiced this 100 times. And then she said, "Some people in our lives are like seasons. They change us, color our memories, and fade. Others? They're constellations. Quiet, fixed, and always above you, even when you're not looking up." People smiled, nodded. She continued, "There are stories we tell to move on. And there are stories we hold because we know they're not finished." I felt something tighten in my throat. I looked around the room. No one seemed to notice. "And sometimes," she said, "we come home not to a place, but to a person. Someone who reminds you who you were, and who you still might be." That was the moment I knew. She wasn't talking about me. You ever have one of those moments where your face is still smiling, but your brain's packed up and walked out? That was me during her speech. I stood there with a drink in my hand, surrounded by polite claps and distant giggles, trying to look like a supportive husband while her voice got softer and more poetic by the second. She closed with this little gem. "Real love doesn't always come at the right time. But when it shows up again, you recognize it. You feel it. And you finally stop running." Then she raised her glass and smiled out over the crowd like she'd just blessed a wedding. They applauded. She stepped down. People wiped their eyes. And me? I stood frozen. Because I didn't know who she'd just married with that speech, but it sure as hell wasn't me. She came back to our table all glow and teeth. "What did you think?" she whispered, leaning in like she'd just told a great joke and wanted me to confirm it landed. I nodded. "Beautiful." She touched my hand. "Thanks for coming, babe. Seriously, it means a lot." I kissed her on the cheek because I had no idea what else to do. The rest of the night felt like walking through someone else's memories. She kept introducing me to people I'd never heard of, dropping inside jokes I wasn't part of, laughing in a way I hadn't heard in years. There was this guy, short, stocky, balding in a dignified way, who she hugged just a little too long. They talked alone for a bit near the bar, and she touched his shoulder when she laughed. Nothing aggressive, just familiar. Later, when we got home, she kicked off her heels and poured herself another glass of wine, like giving that speech had earned her overtime pay. I poured one too, sat at the table and watched her scroll her phone, legs curled under her like nothing had happened. "What made you want to give a speech?" I asked. She looked up. "They asked me. When? A few weeks ago. You didn't think to mention it?" She shrugged. "I wanted it to be a surprise." "It was." She smiled. "I'm glad." And that was it. No follow-up. No deeper dive. Just a vague answer and a refill. She went to bed first. I stayed up, pretending to scroll. But I wasn't really reading anything. I was just watching the speech play back in my head on a loop. The phrasing. The tone. The parts where her voice dipped just enough to sound sincere. I thought about asking again. But I already knew what she'd say. She'd talk circles. Say it was creative or figurative. That I was reading too much into it. She was good with words. Almost too good. The next morning, I made coffee. She came downstairs humming. Like it was the day after Christmas, and she was still glowing from the gifts. I asked what her plans were. She said she wanted to grade papers and maybe clean out her closet. I told her I'd head to the hardware store, grab a few things, get out of her way. That was my excuse. What I actually did was go back upstairs, into her office, and look at the printer. You can tell a lot by the way someone treats their paper trail. She wasn't careless. She usually deleted drafts, emptied the trash bin, even unplugged the printer between uses, something she said saved power. But not this time. Maybe she was too excited. Maybe she forgot. Maybe, deep down, she wanted someone to find it. I lifted the top tray and saw a few loose pages. Nothing labeled. Just a simple Word doc printout with no heading. I sat at her desk and read it. It was titled Reunion Toast Draft. And there it was. Word for word. Nearly everything she'd said the night before. Except this version had one extra paragraph at the top. "Hey Jason, here's the draft. Let me know what you think." Tried to say what I couldn't say back then without making it too obvious. I still can't believe we're actually going to be in the same room again after all this time. Jason. I didn't know a Jason. She'd never mentioned a Jason. But she had emailed him this. It wasn't a toast to the room. It was a love letter in disguise. I flipped the page. At the bottom, scrawled in pen, were the words "cut this if too risky" circled twice. The part she kept? "Some people are more than memories. Some are still pages we haven't finished reading." That was when I closed the folder, put it back in the tray, walked out of the room, and laughed. Because there's nothing quite like finding a lie that sounds exactly like poetry. It's almost flattering how much effort they put in. like getting stabbed with a monogram knife. I didn't confront her. Not yet. That's the thing about moments like this. You only get one shot to make it count. If you blow it, it turns into a fight. If you time it right, it becomes a story. And I had just the audience in mind. It took me 3 days to find Jason. You'd think that would have been the hard part. But no, she left breadcrumbs like she wanted them eaten. All I had to do was follow the scent of nostalgia and bad judgment. The first clue was in the file name. That little reunion toast draft? When I hovered over it in the printer queue, it had a save path listed. /docs/reunion/speech_Jason4.docs. Jason, number 4. Meaning there'd been 3 previous drafts addressed to him that she cared enough to revise. From there, I checked her browser history. Not emails, she cleared those. But cached autofill search terms are trickier. People forget those. One of the terms? Jason Carver High School Reunion Facebook. Got him in 3 clicks. Class of 2004. Varsity soccer. Dated Andrea Miller Jr. in senior year. Voted most likely to marry his high school sweetheart. Irony doesn't age well. Still lived in state. Worked in logistics for a commercial supply chain. 2 kids. 1 wife. Her name was Beth. They'd been married 13 years. The math? Brutal. That's when I started building the timeline. Andrea signs up to help plan the reunion in March. Reconnects with old classmates. Somehow Jason's involved, or at least contacted. She starts writing a speech. One version's casual. The next isn't. By the final draft, she's not writing to the room. She's writing to him. And the kicker? She says all of it on stage. In front of me. In front of Beth. In front of 200 people who probably just assumed it was a quirky metaphor about timing. I started to think back. Months ago, she mentioned Jason once in passing. We were at a Thai place, eating too fast because she had lesson plans to finish. She said something about remembering when we used to go to Red Robin after soccer games. I asked who she meant by we. She said, just the usual crowd. Jason and them. Just the usual crowd. She said it with a little smile. That twitch people get when they're remembering something they shouldn't enjoy that much. I didn't press. I was stupid back then. Trusting. Worse, indifferent. But now I wasn't indifferent. I was just waiting. Waiting for the perfect way to return the favor. Not with a fight, but a finale. Because here's the thing. People like Andrea think they're the main character. Always. They narrate their own betrayals like a romance novel. They say things like unfinished stories and real love comes late, and think it's brave. It's not brave. It's delusional. So I decided I'd give her one last chapter. The one she'd never write for herself. The next week, I printed the email draft. Clean copy. No edits. Same lines she said in that speech, down to the metaphor about constellations. I folded it into thirds, slid it into my jacket pocket. Then I RSVP'd to the reunion afterparty. She told me there wasn't one. That the reunion was the afterparty, a hotel ballroom, some music, some dancing, then home. But she lied. Again. I found out through another classmate. A guy she forgot I followed on Facebook. He posted a photo from the same hotel bar, just a day after the event, tagging a group of former students, including Andrea. Caption: 20 years later, still closing the place down with the OGs. Same bad jokes, more expensive drinks. So I messaged him. Said I miss seeing everyone. Asked if another get-together was planned. He said, funny you ask, a few of us are grabbing drinks again next week. Same spot. Just a casual follow-up. I said I'd be there. And I didn't tell Andrea. That Thursday night, she said she had a late grading session at school. Parent-teacher meetings. Wouldn't be back until after 10. I kissed her goodbye and told her not to stress. Then I drove straight to the bar. Arrived 15 minutes early. Wore a charcoal blazer. No tie. Just enough polish to look like I belonged, but not enough to look like I was trying. I grabbed a drink and found a booth in the corner. Watched the room fill. Watched her arrive. She didn't see me at first. She walked in with Jason. No wife in sight. They weren't touching. Not holding hands. Just laughing a little too comfortably. She wore the same dress from the reunion. Silver wrap. Only this time, no microphone. Just a drink and a low voice and a story she hadn't finished telling. She sat across from him in a booth 2 rows away. And I sat watching like an audience she forgot existed. I waited 30 minutes. Then I stood. Walked over. Pulled up a chair next to their table like I'd just spotted old friends. Jason blinked. Andrea froze. Hey, stranger, I said, smiling wide. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Jason recovered first. Hey man, long time. I nodded. I figured I'd join the after-party. You don't mind, right? Andrea shook her head slowly. No, of course not. I pulled the folded email from my pocket, laid it flat on the table, turned it toward Jason. This yours? I asked casually. He squinted, started reading. By the third sentence, the blood had left his face. Andrea snatched it, tried to fold it back up. Too late. Jason looked at her, then at me, then at the room. I leaned in. I recognized the speech, I said softly. Word for word. Andrea whispered, we weren't. You were, I said. But don't worry. I'm not here to blow up your fantasy. Jason shifted in his seat. Look, man, I'm not here for you either. Then I turned and looked across the bar, right at the woman who'd just walked in. Beth, Jason's wife. She smiled and waved at him, confused. I waved back, then stood. You two have a great night, I said, picking up my drink. I've got someone to dance with. And I walked straight to Beth. Beth didn't even get a drink before she knew something was wrong. I could see it in her eyes the second she spotted me walking toward her. Not confusion, not even surprise. Just that tiny flicker of gut-level awareness. The way a dog hears thunder long before the clouds roll in. She smiled politely anyway. Hi, she said, adjusting her purse strap. Beth, right? Yeah. We met at the reunion, I think. We did. She looked over my shoulder toward the table. Her husband hadn't moved. Neither had mine. They sat like frozen chess pieces, trying to figure out if it was checkmate or just a bluff. Is everything okay? She asked. I nodded. It's about to be. I offered my hand. Come dance with me. Her eyebrows lifted. What? No strings. No agenda. Just 30 seconds of clarity. She hesitated. Then she set her purse down and took my hand. The song playing wasn't anything meaningful. Some soft acoustic cover of a pop hit, the kind of thing they pump into hotels to trick you into thinking your life has a soundtrack. But it worked. It always does. We walked to the floor, started slow dancing, my hand on her waist, hers on my shoulder, like two polite strangers in a silent truce. It was calm. It was weird. It was perfect. We made one slow circle before she whispered, What's happening? I leaned in, just enough for her to hear. Jason and Andrea have been emailing. She froze mid-step. I kept swaying. They've been writing drafts. She gave that speech for him. Not the crowd. Not me. Not even herself. Beth's voice dropped to a whisper. What emails? She printed one. Left it in our office. I found it after the reunion. Her breath caught. Then, how long? Hard to say, but if I had to guess, at least a few months. Enough time to rehearse betrayal until it sounded poetic. Her hand clenched slightly on my shoulder. I felt her swallow. I knew something was off, she said. Yeah, I replied. So did I. Another slow turn. I could feel eyes on us. Andrea. Jason. Probably half the table by now. I didn't look. Didn't need to. Beth was trembling now, just slightly. Not crying. Not breaking. Just realizing. She stared over my shoulder again. Do they know we're talking? I smiled. They will. The song ended. I stepped back. Bow of the head. Gentlemanly. Thanks for the dance, I said. Beth nodded, like she wasn't sure where she was anymore. She walked back toward the table. I watched her reach into her purse. Pull out her phone. Jason stood suddenly, like maybe he thought he could intercept the moment. Too late. Beth held the screen up toward him. Read something. Jason shook his head. Andrea just sat there. Perfect posture. Empty eyes. I turned, walked to the bar, and ordered another drink. Didn't even have to say the name. The bartender just poured it, slid it over like he'd been watching a slow-motion car crash, and figured I deserved a front-row seat and a stiff pour. I took a sip and waited, because I wasn't done. Revenge isn't just about pulling the thread. It's about watching the whole sweater unravel in public. 10 minutes passed. Jason and Beth were arguing now. Whispers too loud to be subtle. Andrea tried to calm them. Touch his arm. He jerked it away. Beth turned, walked toward the exit. Jason followed. Andrea stood up too, but then stopped, like she suddenly realized she didn't know which one she was chasing. I watched her eyes scan the room, then land on me. We locked eyes for 3 seconds. She blinked, then walked over. You need to stop, she hissed, voice low. Why? I asked, swirling my glass. I haven't said a word. You're humiliating me. No, Andrea. You did that yourself. I'm just the guy who didn't applaud. Her jaw clenched. What do you want? To punish me. I leaned in just enough so she had to hear every word. No, I said. I want you to sit with it. You spent 6 months building a speech to another man. You printed it like a love letter and gave it from a stage like a TED Talk. And you thought I'd just let that float into the air like some poetic little secret. Her face went pale. You're blowing this out of proportion. That's the problem with you, I said. You think everything you do is a poem. But it's just cheating, dressed up in metaphors. People were watching us now. She noticed, backed off, straightened her shoulders, tried to smooth the mask back onto her face. I'll see you at home, she said, turning. I chuckled. No, you won't. She stopped, didn't turn around, just froze. I drained the last of my drink and walked away. She came home anyway. I heard the garage open around 11:30. The hum of her car pulling in like it was just another late night at work, like the past few hours hadn't detonated a carefully constructed lie in front of the very people who once voted her most poised. I didn't get up. I didn't say anything. I sat on the couch in the dark, TV off, glass of bourbon untouched on the coffee table, just letting her walk into the silence she earned. She opened the front door with that careful, deliberate push people use when they're trying to test the room before they enter it. She didn't see me right away, flicked on a hallway light, set her purse down like it was fragile. Then her eyes met mine. Still she tried to smile. Not wide, just enough to test if the old rules still applied. Hey, she said. I didn't answer. Do you want to talk about it? I looked at her like she was a museum piece that didn't belong in the exhibit anymore. She sat down across from me, folding her hands in her lap like a student waiting for detention to start. I know how that must have looked, she started. I scoffed. Which part? The speech you rehearsed for another man, or the part where I danced with his wife? She winced. That wasn't supposed to happen. No, I said. I'm sure you planned every other part, though. I didn't plan anything. It was a moment. I didn't think it would go that far. I leaned forward. You printed a toast to him, Andrea. You wrote drafts. You worked on it like it was a novel. Don't pretend it was a moment. She looked down, said nothing. I let the silence grow teeth. Then she said, I never slept with him. I stood, paced once across the rug, hands in my pockets. Calm. Cool, I said. So your defense is emotional adultery with a flair for live performance? It wasn't about cheating, she said, her voice cracking. It was about remembering who I was. Jesus, I muttered. There it is. She blinked. What? The cliché. I needed to remember who I was. That's the go-to, right? When you burn down your own house and don't want to say, I lit the match. Her eyes were wet now, but I didn't care. She wasn't crying for me. She was crying for herself. For the version of the story where she's the brave, conflicted protagonist rediscovering her roots. Not the woman who just got caught whispering sweet nothings into an open mic. I loved you, she said. You wrote poetry for someone else. It wasn't poetry. Then it was worse, I said. Because it worked. People stood up and clapped. Her face hardened. I never meant to humiliate you. No, I said. But you made sure I was there to hear it. That one landed. She looked away. Her voice dropped. What do you want from me? I don't want anything. Then why the spectacle? Why the dance? Why involve Beth? I tilted my head. You gave him a speech in front of 200 people. I gave you a mirror. That's not revenge. That's balance. She didn't have an answer for that. Eventually, she went upstairs. Didn't ask me to follow. Didn't say goodnight. She just closed the door, and I heard her moving around up there, slowly, quietly, like someone who'd just realized her applause came from a crowd she no longer trusted. Over the next few days, the spin campaign began. I didn't play along. She tried to cook dinner like nothing happened. I ate leftovers. She asked if I wanted to talk. I said I already had. She started texting more often, checking in, sending articles about emotional intelligence in long-term relationships. Once, she even sent a meme, something about growing together instead of growing apart. I didn't respond. I wasn't being cruel. I just wasn't buying the rebrand. She wanted to pivot the narrative before it hardened, turn it into a rough patch or a misstep, something we could move past. But there was no moving past this. Because once you've watched someone deliver a eulogy for your marriage with a microphone and a wine glass, there's really nothing left to save. Still, she tried. Until the message came. Beth. She'd been quiet since that night, which I respected. I hadn't reached out, hadn't posted, hadn't turned the moment into a spectacle. Just let it land and settle. But then I got a DM. Simple. Thank you. For not yelling. for not exploding, for just letting me see it myself. I replied, "You deserve to." She liked the message, then sent another. "I've moved out. Thought you should know." I stared at the screen, then typed, "If you ever want to compare speeches, I've got the drafts." She sent a laughing emoji. That was it. But it was enough. Because while Andrea tried to rewrite her moment into something poetic, Beth and I knew what it really was. A performance for one, given in a room full of people. And now, the lights were off. The show was over. And no one was clapping anymore. We didn't split right away. That part surprises people when I tell the story, the few who've earned it. They assume I stormed out, packed a bag, made a scene, something cathartic, something clean. But endings are rarely clean. They're slow, awkward, heavy with all the things unsaid. So we lingered. Andrea stayed in the house, kept making coffee, kept leaving the bathroom door cracked like I'd join her out of habit. She tried movie nights, tried remember this moments. Little inside jokes offered like truce flags. I let them fall. 2 weeks after the after party, I came home to find a candlelit dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta, garlic bread. The good wine we usually save for anniversaries we never celebrated properly. She was dressed like it was 2011 again. Hair curled. The necklace I gave her for our 5th year. Lipstick, red, not her usual nude. She smiled like the speech never happened. Like the paper in the printer never existed. "Sit," she said. I sat. We ate mostly in silence. She asked how work was. I told her I had a new intern who couldn't figure out what BCC meant in an email thread. She laughed, too hard. Halfway through the meal, she reached across the table, touched my hand. "I miss us," she said. I stared at her fingers on mine. "You miss the idea of us," I said. The version that clapped politely and didn't ask questions. Her hand didn't move. She tried again. "People make mistakes." "Sure," I said. "Mistakes are honest." That was a monologue. She looked away, wiped her mouth slowly, folded the napkin. "I didn't think it would matter," she said. That was the closest she'd come to a confession. "You didn't think I'd notice," I corrected. She nodded, almost imperceptibly. And there it was. The truth, not shouted, not begged, just leaked out like a cracked pipe under the floorboards. "I loved you," she said again. "And still," I said, "you wrote about someone else." She tried to blink it away, to rewrite the moment with teary sincerity. But I didn't flinch, didn't soften. "You know what hurts?" I asked. She didn't answer. "That you said those things, all that poetic garbage about constellations and unfinished stories, and meant every word of it. But you never said anything like that about me. Not once." Her breath hitched. "You wanted to be a heroine in your own story. Fine. But don't pretend I was ever more than a prop." She stood, walked to the sink, started rinsing dishes, even though we hadn't finished. I watched her back for a long time, then stood, grabbed my coat. "I'll stay at the Hilton tonight," I said. "You'll have space to figure out how to explain this to yourself in the morning." She turned off the water. "Are you coming back?" I didn't answer. Not then. Not the next morning. Not after. That week, I packed the guest room first. Then the master closet. Then the garage. She didn't stop me. She didn't help either. She just watched like she was witnessing someone else's life collapse. One she used to know. One she could still recite from memory, but no longer felt entitled to claim. When I left, she hugged me. That part will always stick with me. She hugged me, tight, desperate, like a widow clinging to a ghost. "I still think about what we were," she whispered. I stepped back. "Then next time," I said, "write that speech." And I walked out. I didn't block her, didn't trash her name, didn't become the villain in her next romantic retelling. I just let the silence spread. It did all the work for me. 2 months later, I bumped into Beth again. By accident, truly. Grocery store parking lot. She was loading bags into the back of her SUV. I was grabbing coffee filters and a frozen pizza. We stood there for a moment. Two people who once slow danced on the ruins of other people's secrets. She smiled first. "How's the silence treating you?" she asked. I laughed, loud enough to think clearly. She nodded. "Same. We didn't make plans. Didn't flirt. Didn't pretend this was the start of something. Just two people, caught in a strange orbit of shared betrayal, briefly aligned. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes revenge doesn't need blood or fire or spectacle. Sometimes it's just standing still while the people who hurt you talk themselves into irrelevance." Andrea still posts sometimes. Quotes about healing, about growth, about reclaiming your narrative. She's dating again. I think. I don't follow her. But people send me things. Her captions are always poetic now. Always metaphors. But every time I see one, all I can hear is her voice on that stage, giving her speech about finding home in an old flame. And I remember how good it felt to let her deliver it, to let her shine, and then walk away, while the lights were still on.